How does karate relate to culture and language learning? In this seminar, organized by the Research Institute for Bilingual Learning and Teaching at the Open University of Hong Kong, Professor Zhu Hua, Professor of Applied Linguistics and Communication at Birkbeck College, University of London, explores language learning as a process of translanguaging and cultural translation. The empirical base of this talk draws upon a sociolinguistic ethnography of translanguaging practices in a karate club in East London, where highly ethnically and linguistically diverse members of the local community are brought together to learn what is presented to them as a Japanese martial art.
My topic today is who's karate. It doesn't involve you or me doing any karate, but it's really an opportunity for me to share our thoughts on how does karate relate to culture and language learning. And this is the presentation prepared together with me and my team member, Li Wei, and our RA, Daria Pito. The aim of the presentation is using this opportunity to explore language learning as a process of translanguaging and also a process of a cultural translation. The empirical base of this talk is very much drawing from sociolinguistic ethnography in a karate club in East London, when we're looking at language forms and learning of language form and physical movements as cultural practices. In doing so, we very much hope to broaden the concept of language as a multifaceted sense and meaning-making resource. So that's the plan. I'll start with some key theoretical notions that underpin this talk. The first one is culture and cultural translation. For people who are familiar with language and culture, the role of culture in language learning, you may well versed with complexity of relationship between culture and language, particularly when it comes to pedagogical approaches. There are some wonderful works in this area of the role of culture in language learning and teaching. For example, Mike Barron's work on intercultural communicative competence, which includes not just skills and knowledge about the other languages, but also involves critical cultural awareness. And Claire Crump's work on third culture, which emphasizes the in-betweenness of the learner when they understand gaining insight into the language of their learning and also into the culture of they're coming from. So it's kind of like in between two different cultures, and she called it third culture. The third one, also actually from Claire Crump, she actually reflected on the notion of third culture and proposed another notion, recognizing the role of learning on the capacity of the learner to change a context, and also the very fact that when you're actually learning a new language or culture, you actually also learning the capacity to change the very context where language or culture is learned or used. The last one is by Tony Liddicoat. He was talking about learning a new language is actually, in fact, a process of intercultural mediation, where learners is actually mediate through language learning, mediate between languages in negotiating between cultures. For this paper, our position is very much akin to Claire's and also Tony Liddicoat's. We argue language learning and teaching is a process of cultural translation. Here, we're actually using translation not only from the Latin root of the word, looking at the bringing across of different meaning or converting something from one form to another, but also looking at the cultural translation as a way of thinking about how languages, people, and culture are transformed as they move between different places. And we believe the process of translation entails adaptation to the local environment and also in transformation, and it comes with gains and losses. We're hoping in exploring the language learning, cultural learning in a karate club to demonstrate how the process of cultural translation is taking place in its local context and what has been gained and lost during the process. Another key concept is translanguaging. By translanguaging, we look at the combination of trans and languaging. Trans meaning going beyond, and languaging is looking at language as action, as a verb. So this is actually drawing on the definition from Ophelia Garcia and Li Wei's work, looking at translanguaging as dynamic meaning-making process, whereby multilingual speakers go beyond conventional divide between languages and modalities to act, to know, and to be. So while we're talking about translanguaging, Li Wei talked about translanguaging last time when he was here. So when we're talking about translanguaging, it starts really as a pedagogical tool. The origin words people usually attribute it to Welsh language learning by Sam Williams. In his dissertation, he was looking at the fact when the teachers actually explaining something in one language and the output from the learners are usually in a different language. So this is actually translanguaging as a pedagogical tool. And later on, for example, on the slide, there is an instruction handout in English talking about chemistry lesson, burning matter. On the other side of the slide is a Spanish learning lesson in a bilingual education curriculum in New York. And so this is Ophelia Garcia is looking at how the language, different languages, Spanish, English, are used in a bilingual curriculum. So you hear a teacher was referring to the handout in English, but asking the questions in Spanish. And in students' response, particularly as two, you see the combination, the alternation between Spanish and English. So where different languages, particularly the students' home languages, heritage languages, if you like, are drawn upon in facilitating their learning of different languages. So that's the origin of translanguaging as a pedagogical tool. So later on, expanding the translanguaging beyond the classroom, Ophelia Garcia is talking about this is actually translanguaging not just contained in language classroom, but it's very much a new language in reality where we recognize flexible use of linguistic resources by bilinguals as they make sense of their words. I'm sure many of us sitting here actually speak more than one language, two languages, or even 3 or 4 languages. And this is exactly talking about people like us who can use different languages, even if they're named as Chinese, Putonghua, Mandarin, Cantonese, or English as the name. But when we use it, we're not really consciously making decision, I'm speaking Chinese, I'm speaking English, I'm speaking Japanese. But very much it's flexible and using these different language resources as a whole. And there are many terms actually recently describing this kind of flexible use of languages. For example, polylanguages, you may have heard these words. Translanguaging is another term. And so this is the phenomena we're describing using translanguaging, talking about multilingual language users' capacity to create an apparently seamless flow between language and language use. And we believe language do not exist as a discrete system, but it's interesting to see when there are moments when boundaries of languages are marked. So it's actually coming both ways. On one hand, we're interested in how these different resources are combined together, used in between, but also interesting to see when we're talking about different languages and to set down the markers between different languages. So the third reason we want to talk about translanguaging is really interested in not only looking at named languages, but also interested in different modalities. So when we speak, we're not only actually using talking in the named language, but also using other resources. For example, our sensory resources, smell, touch, colors, for example, these are also different modalities. And we combine these different resources, different languages to act, to know, and to be. So in this regard, we are talking about languages, or translanguaging is like orchestration. And that's actually one of the very important development in the recent work from translanguaging scholars, talking about how people combine these different resources together. Alistair Panicook talking about assemblages, and in different piece of work, we are talking about orchestration. So as in music making, different instruments, voices, rhythm, for example, or style, are coordinated in making piece of music. And similarly, in communication, we're arguing in translanguaging in particular, we are employing multiple languages, language varieties and styles, as well as different medium. For example, speaking, writing, signing, gesturing, drawing, touching, and as well as different sensory resources. I have mentioned the sound, color, smell to make sense and meaning. And they do so in a coordinated, orchestrated way. We're not doing them randomly, but actually we do intentionally coordinate these different resources to make meaning and also to understand how the meaning is created when we are listening. So we will analyze later on in this talk how the participants in the karate club orchestrate multiple sense and meaning-making resources beyond the conventional spoken words and utterances in the integrated language and cultural learning. So that's actually the three important conceptual notions I would like to introduce before I get into the empirical part of this talk. So the study reported here is conducted as part of a larger project funded by AHRC, one of the funding bodies in the UK. The project is called Translation, Translanguaging, Investigating Linguistic and Cultural Transformation in Super Diverse Worlds in 4 UK cities, and we carried out sociolinguistic ethnography over 4 years on 4 different contexts, including business, arts, sports, and social legal contexts. And today's talk is very much based on the sports phase. In each city, we use a named language community as an entry point. In the London case, we actually look at the Polish-speaking community, but our interest is not restricted to the Polish only, but we use it as very much as a way into multilingual communities. So the project data, we had a 3-month sociolinguistic, or sometimes people call it linguistic ethnography in 2015. We followed one karate coach when he went to coach in 2 karate clubs. Today we're focusing just on 1 karate club. The data we have collected include field notes, audio, video recordings, interviews, and social media exchanges. The key participant is Sensei Stan. This is the karate club run by charity, Roma charity, to support children in an ethnic diverse area of East London. Sensei Stan. Sensei is Japanese. Lots of people might be familiar with Japanese. Sensei is Japanese word for teacher. So he is 6th dan in Japanese Funikosha karate. Anybody who really does karate here? A few hands. So if you are serious about karate, you might know if you are 6th dan, you're very high, you're very good, and you probably haven't really met anybody who are higher than you in dan. Dan is one of ranking system. He was born into a family of Polish Roma travelers, grown up in Poland, and moved to London as an adult. He speaks Romani as his home languages, a number of Romani. His parents speak different kinds of Romani, and he learned Polish when he started a school in Poland, and he began to learn English when he moved to London at the time, 7 years before we started the project. And he's also very familiar with some specialized Japanese karate terms. He has, in the karate or dojo, if you like, there is an assistant, David. He has similar background to Sensei Stan. He coming from Polish Roma origin, but actually grown up in London. So he speaks English as first language and also learned French in his class in the school. The students in the karate are local children. Although this is a charity set up for the Roma children, but they actually also welcome the children actually living locally. So you have variety of language backgrounds, and you heard these different languages in the karate club. So this is the picture of a karate club. It's actually in a very diverse area in London. It's actually, according to 2011 census, the most ethnically diverse borough in the UK. And related to that, it is also most social and economically deprived area. So the top picture is what it looks outside. It's based in a community center in East London. And when we actually went there to do the field work, sometime we went in the evening, we kind of sense this is actually quite not safe area. This is the one of the notes made by my RA. She was talking about she could smell drugs while waiting. But then for Sensei Stan, when we talked about the purpose of the karate club, he was talking about he would really want the children in rather than out, meaning he actually seeing this karate club as engagement of youth in a more physically, mentally constructive activities. The bottom one is what looks inside the karate club. As you see, this is actually quite empty. The hall is very bare. But whenever there is a karate club, the sensei would actually take trouble to make into karate club. So the tatami, the colored mat, actually every time they run the karate club, they actually need to spend a bit of time putting these tatami mat together. And the colors is actually using the red and blue to stage different parts of a karate training. And at the other side of this second picture, you see the doors, cupboard doors. So when the cupboard doors open, lots of pictures on the door will actually become visible. And the doors, the images are meaningful. So here are actually two images we found on the karate door when it's opened up for the karate training session. The one on your left is a logo of the club. This is you see the Roma Karate Club, and this is actually coming in the biggest font on this logo. And the middle one, the wheel, represents the nature of the community. It's a mobile nature of the community. On either side, you see the Japanese character for the karate do and also the style of karate. And the middle one, in the middle of the most probably the visible place is the name of the karate named by Stan, Agai Kan. However, when I asked him where this word coming from, he said this is the name of the karate club he learned in Poland, and he wasn't sure why his Polish karate coach chose this name. But in Japanese, Agai Kan means up, and kan means house. So kind of talking about the house on the hill or something going up, something like that. But Stan himself he isn't sure where the meaning coming from. On the other side of the slide is a dojo code. Dojo is a place of training, and this is talking about the key proper behaviors and practice expected in karate. And the second one is respect, and that's the notion of a cultural value we're going to come back to later. Now, before talking about interactions in the karate, I need to talk about the cultural translation of karate. For people who actually know karate, the origins of karate are often attributed to sort of the Chinese martial arts that was introduced in OUHK Island. That's actually where the origins of karate usually attributed to Okinawa Island, and that's part of the OUHK Islands, sort of the small but connected islands to the south of Japan. But at that time, around 19th century, karate was known as Tang or China hand. So that's actually the character people associated with karate as a China hand. And lots of sociology work has actually talking about karate from the day one. It has never been merely the product of one nation or one culture, but rather the outcome of interaction in East Asia between groups, sharing frequent and prolonged contact. So you see the origin, not just actually coming from south of Japan, but also the Chinese martial art combined with local martial art. After annexation of island by the Japanese government, karate was brought to the mainland of Japan, sort of around beginning of 20th century. So at that time, it was tricky time or turbulent time in the Japanese history, and there was war between Japan and China. So the Funakoshi, who was known as the master, sort of the credited for bringing karate to Japan, he thought if you have a name that's actually connected with China, that doesn't work. So he decided to change the name from China hand to karate, empty hand. And that was actually a really interesting move in the sense, bringing emptiness, the different character, the sound doesn't change. Emptiness or nothingness is actually brought out, bringing the Buddhism philosophy, talking about state of being nothing, having an empty, therefore pure mind as a highly valued practices. So in that way, they changed the practice to the metaphysical realm by embracing references not only to unapt competitive application, but to Buddhism and Taoism concept of transcendent spirituality. So, and then later on, the suffix Dao, Do was added sometime later, creating the name of Karate Do to further emphasize and promote the art as a martial way that possessed peri-religious undertone. So the change of name actually brought in the Buddhist philosophy, but also opened up the martial art to re-emphasize or to highlight the fact karate is empty hands, doesn't actually involve weapons usually, but also bring in the philosophy of the Buddhism and Taoism concept of doing nothing. So coincide with that time, the name change, we've seen during this period of time, karate become much more systematized, so it's become more ritualized, militarized, and unified in the sense that actually also bring in practice from judo and kendo, some more sort of traditional martial art connected in East Asia. And then this is the time when you see the ranking of colored belts. Different color in karate represent different expertise, as well as wearing the uniform gi and bowing. When you enter the training hall, when you're actually lining up students, you need to line up in order for rank, different colors, and also seated meditation. So all these practice was sort of brought in during that time. But that's actually not just all the story of karate. Equally important is actually how karate became popular outside Japan. According to the World Karate Federation, there are over 100 million karate practitioners worldwide, and that actually make it the most popular so-called Japanese sports outside Japan. People attributed karate to Okinawa, so not Japanese enough at that time. Ironically, it was a key to the survival of karate during the Second World War. Because karate was regarded as the art of self-defense, during the Second World War, it was actually allowed to practice, while other more competitive sports was closing down. And it was actually brought back sort of to American when their military army retired from Japan. So we have the first karate dojo in the US in 1946 and was introduced into the training program of US Air Force and then spread out outside America. The appropriation of karate, and recently people talking about how commercialized karate practice has become one of the clubs you see on the street and selling and become very much sort of the part of a globalization, if you like, into this commodity stage. So that's actually how karate from 14th centuries, a local martial art combined with Chinese martial art become a global martial art. Now, what's happening in the club in terms of languages? So we have been looking at following and examining the language practices inside the dojo. What we found is actually in coaching, Sensei Stan uses Japanese, Polish, English, and occasionally Romani, his home languages, in coaching. And we'll see some examples later on. He alternates between Japanese, Polish, English in very flexible ways. However, this flexible approach underpinned by different languages for different purposes. For Japanese, it's actually very much used as language command, taught and drilled as part of a karate techniques and practice as language performance and rituals. And for other languages, they are used very much as languages of instructions, elaboration, giving out information, or rapport building. In this context, Japanese is very much learned, taught, and talked about as a formulaic expressions, meaning they are actually used as chunks or interactional routines. In terms of the performing formulaic Japanese, we're actually going to watch a video talking about how Japanese is actually used as language performance. The video clip is a performance given a demonstration led by Stan in a community event where he and a few children were invited from the karate club to perform in a community event. So you see from this picture, children line up in a row in front of audiences, and Stan stands there to give children's instructions. And he cues the children with his commands, body demonstrations, and eye contact. And sometimes you will hear the change in his intonation is also meaningful. And the falling tone, he changed it into falling tone when he was counting in Japanese, when he count to 3. You will hear that. His commands, all of them in kind of a format of formulaic Japanese. And sometimes occasionally he use English equivalent immediately after Japanese command, but that's very rare, in particular in this demonstration. So the video is about 1 minute, actually. There are handouts. If people are actually not familiar with Japanese, you can refer to the handout. In the handout, which you may have when you walk in, this is the kind of example of multimodality transcription. So we put down in different column, we put down verbal, that's what you will hear, and body movement, we describe what kind of body movement that actually accompanied the verbal instructions, and we have visual there as well. Essentially, the image captures to demonstrate what's going on. So as you see, there are lots of Japanese phrases, more or less in formulaic Japanese style. So this kind of Japanese becomes a significant part of performing and showcasing karate. Stan, he is a very confident user of Japanese karate terms and very capable of commanding all the karate-related activities effectively using Japanese terms and phrases most of the time. In fact, he actually really very much regarding the fact he can use Japanese specialized terms is part of his expertise. And his attitude toward Japanese seemed to be motivated by his firm belief. For example, when we interviewed him, we really having ethnography chat about this practice. He thought the reason why you have to use Japanese terminologies so that it will not get forgotten. It here refers to the origins of karate. And he was also talking about, so let's do everything as it's done in Japan. But the question, as I have explained, who's karate? Stan has never been to Japan. He learned to practice and teach karate in Poland and Britain from non-Japanese instructors. So his karate Japanese is also learned from non-Japanese karate practitioners. So as we see from the history of karate, karate is very much still associated more with Okinawa than Japanese main islands. And many, perhaps people who are familiar with karate here, you may not actually that familiar with karate terms and moves unless you are really, really into it. So the karate here is being taught as, is very much imagined karate and learned and modeled on traditions reinvented by the Americans and other non-Japanese practitioners. Nevertheless, despite this, the children have learned the formulaic Japanese, which they use confidently, as you see, in synchrony with physical moves. They do this and they answer, will respond to Stan's Japanese instructions. You can see very clearly from the video. And they have also learned the functional differentiation of different languages as they show good awareness of which language to use with whom and when in the club. So that's an example of the formulaic Japanese. We're going to look at another example, this time looking at rituals. Rituals, as Bell has talked about, are windows on the cultural dynamics by which people make and remake their world. So in fact, they are social dramas, but through these social dramas, the deepest values of culture are made clear. And there are plenty of examples of ritual practice and ritual learning in our field notes and recording. And the video I'm going to play in a minute is an opening ritual of a karate practice in this club. It's led by Stan. As you see, he was standing in front of children, and also standing next to him is his assistant, David, who has similar cultural background from Polish, Roma family. The opening ritual, or the social drama, consists of sitting down, traditional sitting, kneeling down essentially, and meditation and bowing to the master, sensei, and practitioner. So 3 bow are very much important part of the opening ritual. But before performing the ritual, Stan gave a step-by-step demonstration about the body posture, how you should sit down, which knee need to go down when you actually do the Caesar required for the ritual. And the demonstration, he guided demonstration through a combination of commands, explanations, and meta comments in Japanese, English, and Polish. And equally important, as you see from the video, gestures and body modeling. So we're going to play these short clips of video. The sound may not come through very clearly, but if not, maybe you want to watch the body movement and who's actually leading what. What's the order of the movement if the sound doesn't come out clearly. And there's a handout, a second example in the handout if you want to refer to the transcriptions.
Let's watch line. Yes. Next. Left. Each left. Polite. Copy. Patrz na linię, nie na mnie. Right? And see. Next is very important. Stand up is right. The same, yeah? Left and left. Stay there. Again. Os. Say that. And close eyes. Mocno. Chin up. Plecy wyprostowane. Back and straight. Kaius, head on the knees. Mocno. Szamani rej. Siani rej. Otakani rej. Remember? Which leg? Right. No, yes, right. H, knee,
So in the video clip, and I put the examples of experts there, but I'm not going through all of them. So this is just actually in the video clip, facing the children together with David and his assistant. Stan starts with the command, attention command, masubidachi, to get children to line up and ask them to watch where to stand and which knee to go down first. David and the children then take turns to follow Stan's move. And then meanwhile, Stan urged the children to copy. So this is like the first 7 turns. What we have seen this video clip is the ritual practice and how these ritual practice manipulate and to transform the space through explicit and explicit symbols. So these symbols including these ceremonial deep bows, and also you can see the faded portrait of the master here on the door. When the cupboard door open, the space transformed into karate dojo. And semiotic of doing things, who's leading which and who's giving command. There is a change of order of commands in this video clip. When they actually bowing to the master, Stan actually asked David to give the order to bow. So there is a subtle change of the order, and this order of doing things is meaningful. So in this kind of a manipulation of either different kinds of symbols, we see a new social order of a karate word. So this new social order of a karate word is marked by hierarchy and also respect. That's the value they are very keen to learn through these rituals and ritual practices. When we're actually talking about the respect, Stan very much believe it's a very good thing that karate teaches respect. And apparently this is actually a very elective cultural translation process. The reason he talking about respect very much is not just from the dojo code we have talked about earlier, but also from his personal experience. He was talking about respect for him matters most, and what believes also very, very important to the children in their circumstances. Coming to the discussion and conclusion, when we talking about the karate club in the context of learning, teaching, 2 common questions that usually come up is it really language learning, or what exactly have the children learned? So maybe on surface, it may seem that children have merely learned a few formulaic Japanese words, or truncated, or chunks, or interaction routines, as you may like. They may have actually very much restricted to these set version of specialized Japanese karate terms. And this surely cannot be regarded as proper language learning, as it doesn't involve practicing grammatically complete structure. But then these questions are underpinned by a number of assumptions. If we can unpack, the assumptions usually are named language such as Polish, English, Roma are real linguistic identities. And secondly, language is separable from other semiotic systems in everyday communication and learning. And thirdly, if you ask these questions, usually because you are thinking about language learning is about, or should be at least to be aimed at, acquiring complete knowledge of named languages. Okay? But the theoretical discussion of translanguaging challenges all these assumptions. So for example, if we believe in translanguaging, if we think translanguaging is really about looking at different linguistic resources, these named languages are only political entities. They do not exist as psychological realities. Secondly, language, as you see from the example, is inseparable in meaning and sense-making, particularly when it comes to these meaning and sense-making from other semiotic resources. Body movements, colors, belt, the semiotic orders for doing things, movement, they all are equally meaningful, if not meaningful, than languages in understanding the karate, what's going on, and getting things done in the karate club. And we believe for language learning, it's not just about learning a system, a knowledge of a named language, but more about expanding communicative repertoires and learning to transcend the boundaries of different languages, different modalities, and bring them as a whole. In terms of value of respect, together with discipline, as Sensei Stan is very keen to emphasize, we know it's actually not unique to the Japanese culture or the culture of karate, but it is through karate that these values are made real, so kind of made embodied through the karate practice. What is presented, imagined as foreign or different or new, become tangible through the embodied learning. Through these embodied learning, through these transformation, we see new subjectivities and new identities coming from the karate participant in this club. So for us, Stan is no longer just a migrant born into Polish Roma family coming to London as an adult, but a very confident multilingual speaker of karate coach. His assistant, David, is actually also capable using his multilingual skills. He's only 15, but because of karate as his position in the karate club, he became very confident to give instruction to other children as well as helping Stan to translate. And finally, so what does learning a language mean? I hope in this presentation, I have convinced you language and cultural learning is a process of cultural translation. What has been made real and relevant in the local context is very much a process of cultural translation. And through this translation, learning happens not just actually beyond the classroom and the school, but actually through multiple means and for multiple purposes. And most importantly, learning to orchestrate as the participants in the karate club do, multilingual, multisensory, multimodality, and multisemiotic resources to make meaning and to make sense in our everyday lives. So that's all, and thank you for listening. Thank you.